I think we're all set. So good afternoon. A little bit of a snowy day, but it's a good day to be home and cooking and thinking about cooking things. So, Elena, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. I am going to, and is my video okay on your end, Erica? Okay, perfect.
Yes, you're good.
Good. We had little technical difficulties before we got started today. Um, so today we're going to talk about heart health because February is Heart Health Month, right? And we're almost at the end of it, but that's okay. Never too late to talk about it. I am going to get started with a little recipe first. So we're going to make our salmon sweet potato burgers, basically. So I have pre-cooked my sweet potato, and I honestly just did it in the microwave. So we're going to scoop out about a cup of sweet potato. And this will not only, help hold that burger together, but it will also, give us some fiber and then some vitamin A in the form of beta carotene, right? So anytime we have this like dark orange color in our fruits and vegetables, we know that it is rich in that beta carotene, which is important for our immune system, our eyesight. So I'm going to put all this in here. We know that the fiber is good for our heart health. I'm glad I had a minute for this to cool off because I did burn my hand on it right when I took it out.
How long do you microwave it for to
So
cook?
this size one, I did like about six, I think I did 6 or 7 minutes. Sometimes I flip them in between, like, in the middle of the cycle. But actually, this is a really good texture. Nice and scoopable. Great. So we have about a cup of the sweet potato. So we're going to put this into our bowl. All right, and then we're going to add in our salmon. So Aldi's has these like really large cans of salmon that they sell. So this is wild Alaska pink salmon. You can use really any canned salmon or fresh salmon if you'd like. It's nice to have canned salmon on hand just because it's, stores well. It's easy to grab if you need to use it in something. I find that it works best in something like this, like a patty or something similar. You could also do salmon salad, like a swap for tuna. But we know that salmon is one of our fattier fishes, so it has a lot of those omega-3 fatty acids in it. So this is a little bit of a larger can, so I'm going to use about half of this can. And you will notice when you use canned salmon, like it does have some like skin and bones, but the bones are really like disintegrated. So they break down really well in something like this. They're just, they're not going to be like what you picture with like a typical fish bone. If you don't like that, the little pouches tend to not have the bones in them. But there are some really good benefits for that. Like you are going to have some natural calcium in fish like this, just because it does have the bones in it. So almost 200 milligrams of calcium per serving in this. Great. So I've got our salmon and our sweet potato in here. So we're going to add in some ground flaxseed. And this is just going to help it hold its form and stay together a little bit better. So we'll do a tablespoon of ground flax. And then we're going to do a half cup of panko breadcrumbs. They didn't have plain, so I did get like the Italian season one, and that's fine. Like, it's just going to give it a little extra flavor. And then we're going to do our Dijon mustard, and I did forget to grab that out, so let me go get that out of the fridge real quick. And then we're going to do some lemon juice. So you could either use fresh or, jarred. We're going to use just a little bit of salt. So you're already going to have some sodium from those, the Dijon mustard, and even the canned salmon has some sodium as well. So we're going to do just an 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, and then the same of the cayenne pepper. And then you can just, any other seasonings you're interested in, you can certainly add for some extra flavor. Now I have the oven preheated to 400. So we're going to mix this up. I am going to bake this. You could also, I don't know how well it would go on an actual grill. I think it would work well more on like a black top or a George Foreman grill, something of that to that effect. Though you could certainly try like a regular grill. Because the sweet potato and the panko and the flax really do help hold it together a little bit. The flax will kind of help absorb some of the excess liquid that might be in this. Great, so we're gonna make 4 patties with this. Just kind of like break it into little equivalent amounts. Okay. Great. Okay. Great, so this is going to go in for 10 minutes at 400. So we'll put that in and then we'll flip it midway and let it go on the other side. Great. All right. So Erica's going to help me get my slides up since we had some issues with the computer today. So we're going to talk today about eating for heart health.
All right, hold on. Sorry.
No worries.
There we go.
Awesome. So we have a couple like tried and true diets for heart health. So the Mediterranean diet, definitely some good research on that. We have healthy fats in there, legumes, lentils, all of those types of things. Our fatty fish, so our salmon and sardines, especially good for that, mackerel, and then veggies and fruits. We also have the DASH diet. So if you haven't heard of that, that's a type of eating plan that's been researched for reducing hypertension. So within that, it's very high in fruits and vegetables. So it's naturally higher in potassium and then also magnesium to lower blood pressure. It's high in the fruits and veggies. It's actually also has a couple servings of low fat dairy per day in there, and then some lean protein sources. There's also the plant-based diet. So we also know that diet can be really beneficial for heart health, reducing cardiovascular disease risk. So we see these diets, just these dietary patterns that tend to be higher in plant foods were associated with a lower risk of cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. So really just moving more towards kind of that plant-based eating pattern, which would be, part of the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, and then just like that whole foods plant-based diet. As far as heart health goes, we have different types of fat, and we are going to talk a little bit about the impact that those might have on our heart health. So we have our monounsaturated fat that's found in our olive oil, avocados, some of our nuts have some monounsaturated fats in them. And that specific type of fat can help lower our LDL, or that bad cholesterol in the blood. We have the omega-3 fatty acids, so that's found in salmon, walnuts, so specifically like our English walnuts that we can buy at the store, chia seeds, ground flax seeds, even hemp is also a source of that omega-3 fatty acids. And we see that will help reduce inflammation and help to lower blood pressure, among other things. Some research on it helping to reduce risk for depression or reduce some symptoms in people that are suffering from some of those conditions. Then we have saturated fat. So that's anything. So saturated fat is hard at room temperature. So that's found in butter, red meat, cheese. The recommendation is really to use in moderation because they can bump up our LDL cholesterol levels. And then we have trans fat. So trans fat was a function of, the processed food companies, right? So they took kind of like a liquid oil and they switched the bond of the fat molecules to make it hard at room temperature again. But, it's more of a problem for heart disease and things like that. So we recommend just avoiding trans fat. And now we can see on the label if things have trans fat. So a lot of the companies are like, pulling that, that out of their products so that they can put 0 grams of trans fat on their labels.
Sorry, there we go.
Okay. And then fiber, right? So we talk a lot about fiber and heart health. So we have those two different types of fiber. We have soluble fiber. So soluble fiber helps to gel up. It absorbs that cholesterol and helps us get it out of the body. So kind of like they liken soluble fiber as like a brush. So it's like absorbing. Actually, no, that's insoluble is like the brush that kind of like cleans the intestines. But soluble fiber gels up and it brings the cholesterol out. And that's in our oats, our beans, our lentils, chia seed, ground flax seed. So those things that kind of swell when we add liquid to them. And then we have that insoluble fiber that we've talked about before, that's kind of like that roughage that just kind of promotes the bowel movements to come through the body. So we really want to boost our fiber, aiming for about 25 to 35 grams per day. Not only to help with heart health, but then all sorts of other good things. So some ways for us to add fiber. So we can choose whole grains over refined grains, adding fruits and vegetables to every meal. For snacks, we could snack on nuts and seeds, roasted beans. I know we talked about those before. So like roasted chickpeas, roasted edamame. That's kind of an easy thing to kind of keep on hand. You know, maybe we keep some in our bags or in our cars if we need something quick. Also, you know, raw veggies, fruits, having beans and lentils. So finding ways to kind of include them in our day. So in soups, salads, main dishes. You know, we've talked about cooking those red lentils and maybe adding them to casseroles. And if we're doing like taco meat, we can mix them in with taco meat. Some people, you know, we've put them in a smoothie before, I think, in this class. So just different ways to kind of boost those is really helpful for boosting our fiber intake. And then starting our day with a high fiber breakfast. So I always like to tell my clients that don't eat breakfast, like breakfast is such a great opportunity to get a large, you know, boost of fiber into your day, right? So it's always good to kind of include that meal in and really focus in on making it be fiber heavy. And then we said the red lentils, you use walnuts as a meat extender, mushrooms. So those things kind of like chopped up can just kind of carry the meat a little farther if you're using meat. All right. And then eating a rainbow, right? We've talked about this before. So when we talk about that, we kind of hone in on those plant chemicals or those phytochemicals. So those are those chemicals that protect the plants in, you know, bad weather. More are created in kind of harsh environments in these plants. So in our bodies, they may work as antioxidants and block carcinogens. They vary by color, so that's why we say eat the rainbow, so that you can expose yourself to a wide variety of them throughout the day. You know that lycopene, carotenoids, which we talked about in the sweet potato, lutein, isoflavones, so many of them, and just, you know, focusing on eating all of those different colors can help bring those different phytochemicals into the body. And then veggies and fruits, right? So we want to hone in on those, especially if we're trying to kind of develop this plant forward eating dietary pattern. So, you know, when we think of our fruit, we want to focus in on, you know, what's a serving. We want to probably get about 2 to 3 servings of fruits a day. And that would be like a cup of fruit, half cup of dried fruit. Sorry, it's a little far away for me. A small piece of fresh fruit. So kind of picture like a baseball size piece of fruit, a cup of fruit juice. And we obviously would prefer like the whole fruits over the fruit juice. But if we're choosing to incorporate in some fruit juice, we'd want it to have no added sugar in it, right? And then for veggies, so we want to shoot for probably like 3+ servings of vegetables a day. And a serving would be like a cup of raw or cooked veggies, 2 cups of raw leafy greens, or a cup of vegetable juice. Sorry, I forgot to turn off my dryer and it's a little bit loud. Great. And now I'm going to grab out the sweet potato salmon burgers. We're going to flip them and then we'll get back into this. Okay, we'll just give these a little flip. We might need like an extra 5 minutes or so. We'll set it for 15 now because I didn't really smush them down. Now, obviously nothing in here is raw, so we don't have to worry about them quite as much as we do like, you know, we don't have to worry about them at all versus like a beef burger. But we still want it cooked all the way through so it has better taste to it and maybe get a little caramelization of the sweet potatoes. right, so that has 15 minutes on it. Now for that, when we serve that, you could just use it like, we don't need to put it in a bun. We are getting some healthy carbohydrates from the sweet potatoes that are in those. So we might serve it with, maybe some avocado on top with like a side salad, maybe some beans, like a little bean salad, something like that. Or you could do a bun too. That's always an option, but we don't have to be tied to the buns. Great. All right. And then let's talk through some ways to increase fruit and vegetable intake. So we want to choose a fruit or a vegetable at every meal, possibly both. Add extra vegetables into soups, stews, and casseroles. Make a smoothie so we can get a serving of like fruit and vegetables into a smoothie. Prepare vegetables and store them in the fridge. So we might chop things ahead of time, or maybe make a batch of roasted vegetables, a batch of stir-fried vegetables. So we just have something easy to grab from the fridge. Okay. And then when it comes to salt, I want to talk about heart health. So one thing I've noticed is a lot of people now are drinking these like hydration beverages. And while they have a place, we do have to be a little bit cautious with those if we're not in a situation where we're actually like sweating or losing extra salt and electrolytes through exercise, vomiting or diarrhea, fever. Those are all the situations where we probably need some extra electrolytes. For the vast majority of people, we can just get that from our foods and just drink water. So just kind of keeping that in mind. If you're going through cancer treatment and having certain side effects and things, you might require, something like that. Some of them just have a whole lot of sodium in them. So it's just something to kind of pay attention to. They seem like they're healthy and they're being marketed for everybody, but not everybody really needs them. So when we look at salt specifically, we have that recommendation. So the American Heart Association put out a recommendation of like 1,500 milligrams a day. The dietary guidelines have like 2,300 milligrams a day as their recommendation. So I always say like somewhere in the middle is probably, where we belong, unless people have been told otherwise by their provider. Maybe they have a certain restriction or a certain increased need. But what sodium does is it holds on to water, so it can put extra pressure on our heart and vessels. We know that 70% of that sodium comes from processed foods and restaurant foods. So, when we look at labels, if you're ever trying to like build a meal, like for example, like all the fast food chains always have their nutrition information online, right? So, different places you can try to figure out like, well, let me see if I can find something that's maybe like around 500 to 600 milligrams of sodium for a meal. It can be very difficult at a lot of places. Like if you start looking at it, like it's very eye-opening. And that's not any really, like the fancy restaurants really have a lot of salt too. Like they cook with a lot of salt. So just something to kind of keep in mind. Dining out can really increase that intake. So some tips and tricks. We know that like rinsing canned beans and veggies, that can pull about 40% of the sodium off of the food. Obviously we could play around with different herbs and spices, lemon juice, different things to kind of help that flavor instead of adding extra sodium. Great. And then heart healthy plate. So when we talk about, I think the plate is still like a good visual for people just because we eat off of plates for the most part. So just trying to think of like that half of the plate be vegetables and fruits. So greens, berries, citrus, cruciferous vegetables. So that would be things like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. Just focusing on like really boosting half of the plate with those foods. And actually, like I think we've talked in the past, there's a lot of talk out in the world of the GLP-1 medications, right? But we can enhance our own GLP-1 production if we eat our veggies first at our meal. So that's kind of a little trick that we can do on our own. So we can start with our veggies and then our protein and then our starch. And that's like a good way to do it to kind of enhance those levels on our own. So that just helps with our satiety. And then about a quarter of the plate being a lean protein. So that might be fish, it might be poultry, legumes, tofu, eggs, something like that. And then a quarter of that plate can be whole grains. So quinoa, brown rice, farro, oats, sweet potato. So like the starchy vegetables, winter squashes, things like that. And then on the side or on top of things, a small serving of healthy fats. So maybe it's a little bit of like olive oil on our salad or our greens. Or maybe like a little bit of avocado on this salmon patty or some nuts, on top of our oatmeal or, something like that. And then obviously like pushing more of these whole plant foods in. So our whole grains, our legumes, veggies, fruits, nuts, seeds, herbs, spices. So just trying to find ways to kind of continually add this into our regimen. And then those plant-based protein sources. So thinking through some ways to kind of incorporate these in. So obviously things like tofu and tempeh, we've talked about those in these classes and done some recipes with them. Legumes, nuts, seeds, even whole grains have some protein in them. Lots of different recipe websites. So always some different options out there for everybody. And then that nutritionfacts.org, if you're kind of like newer to my classes, Dr. Michael Greger has really nice videos on there about a variety of topics, and then like really a ton on heart health. He actually has a book that's really pretty cool. It's a very small, like manageable book to read, but it's on lowering your LDL cholesterol. So he just pulls together all the research that's been done on lowering that LDL cholesterol and like specific things to focus in on. So if that's one of your concerns, I do recommend his stuff. You might check out some of his videos first, but a lot of the talk on the soluble fiber, like we talked about today, and then some other different like little tips that he has on there. Great. Any questions on this content right now? All right. Great. So what we'll do, that has about 7 more minutes on it. We're going to get started on our date truffles. And these are so good. They're like my favorite sweet treat. So what I'm going to do first, so I have my dates. So I would recommend getting like the smaller ones. So these are like, about an inch long. I like this brand, the Mariani ones. They're really nice. So I'm just going to put some dates on this tray. Now this is a really nice little, little substitute if you celebrate like Easter, like a nice substitute for like peanut butter eggs. Much healthier. So the heart health piece that's coming from this is, our dark chocolate actually, has some really good antioxidants in it, and some good phytochemicals, and even some fiber in that, and like a little bit of fiber in the dates and our peanut butter. So, the snack ends up having like for 2 dates about 2 grams of fiber, which, isn't bad. But the good thing is that there's no added sugar in these, just because the dates are sweet enough on their own. So you can either peel open the dates or cut them. They're kind of already, some of them are already cut, but I had some family members in my house complain about me like managing these with my fingers. So I'll be a little more clean about it, I guess. I'm like, you don't have to eat them if you don't like that. get these open. So kind of dates are just, I think we did another date recipe in here where we stuffed it with like the Greek yogurt and pumpkin spice, I think. They just taste so good stuffed with things. I've done like dates stuffed with goat cheese before. That's always a favorite at like holiday appetizers. Salmon cakes smell very yummy. Now that mixture too for the salmon, you can do a lot of things with it. Like you don't have to make the salmon burgers. I know in this class, maybe last year we made stuffed mushrooms with like a salmon mixture. So that one could go inside of like mushrooms or like portobello, like larger mushrooms. Lots of different things you can do with that. All right, so I just have some dark chocolate chips. So I'm just gonna melt these in the microwave. You can do it in a double boiler too. You don't have to use the microwave, but I'm going to put them in for about 40 seconds. And then we got my peanut butter out. So we're going to spread some peanut butter in these. You could also use almond butter, sunflower seed butter, whatever you have, tahini. I'm just going to start by putting probably like about a half teaspoon in every one. Let me get that out of the microwave. Let me just stir these up till it's you know, almost like a creamy, heated creamy blend. Okay. Great. All right, almost done with this. Great, and then we're just going to add drizzle a little bit of chocolate on each one. Then you're going to keep this in the fridge after we add our powdered cocoa powder to it, and it'll harden up, and you have just like a nice little bite-sized treat. That was about 2 tablespoons of dark chocolate chips that I melted. You probably could make a couple more. Great, and then we're just gonna do a little bit of the cocoa powder. So we're just to make it more of like a truffle. I'm just gonna put a little bit in this little sifter, and we're just gonna dust the tops.
able to hold up the tray when you're done so we
Yeah.
can see, that would be good.
I'm like blocking it.
I know
with
it's
my-
hard because it's flat, but
No, we can certainly hold it up. Yep. So our little truffles, they're not the prettiest of things. I'm sure somebody could make them a little prettier, but they're so yummy. Great. Now let me grab out our salmon patties. And these look perfect. Great. So really good. They have a good, good texture. You know, they're mostly staying together. And yeah, so those are our recipes for today. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yes, back on when you were talking about Dr. Michael Greger, is it nutritionfacts.org? Is that the website for him?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right,
Yeah.
very good.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh.
He's good recipes on there too, which is like just a lot of resources.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. Anybody else?
About the salmon burgers, could you
Yeah.
do them in a skillet as opposed to the oven?
Yeah, I did. So I did them on a skillet when I first made them, like as a little demo. I didn't love they stuck a lot more, you know, to my pan.
Oh, okay.
But this, you know, they're not sticking to this, which is nice.
Right.
So
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, I like this texture better, to be honest, than what that did my skillet.
Okay.
Yeah. And you could even like once they're cooked, you could even like freeze them, you know, and then or even like freeze them without being cooked, probably like in between parchment paper.
Yeah. Yep.
Great. Wonderful. Anybody else have anything or anything they want? Like we have some upcoming classes, so we're doing like spring clean out kind of next month. So if anybody has any foods they want to be, you know, to see cooked, you know, and put into a recipe, just keep me posted. I don't know if anybody has any ideas or requests. I'm hoping prepping for that class will also motivate me to like spring clean my house, but we'll see.
if we could just get some spring to be here,
Yes,
that would be
Exactly. Exactly, Erica. Yeah.
very
Yeah.
true. Yeah. Yeah. We're just still in hibernation mode with this kind of level for sure. Well, good.
All right. Well, thank you, Elena. And if you have future questions, you know, we can always connect you with Elena and get answers if needed. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.